A massive piece of Greenland's ice cap just broke off from the ice sheet, and researchers are seriously concerned. The glacier is some 110 square kilometers in size, making it one of the most significant single losses of ice mass in Arctic history. To scientists, ecologists, and people who care about having an environment to live in, this is often considered pretty bad, but nations around the world and the corporations within them are seeing nothing but dollar signs. See, unlike the Antarctic, the Arctic is not a single impassable continent. It's an ice cap stretching down over several archipelagos and landmasses. For centuries, the Arctic has been nigh on impassable, as the ice is simply too thick and dangerous. But as the ice melts and the equator becomes unbearably hot, this ice will open up all sorts of new passageways through the Arctic. Claims over Arctic waterways are already being heavily sought as America, Russia, Canada, Norway, Denmark, and Finland jockey for position over who gets to control these potentially highly profitable trade routes. Next is the oldest DNA. A group of Danish researchers in Greenland made an incredible discovery, finding the oldest DNA ever. This fleck of genetic material was determined to be 2 million years old. That outstrips the previously oldest known DNA by 1 million years. The known history of life stretches back hundreds of millions of years, but only fossils, no DNA, can be recovered from that far back. This isn't just some shred of DNA either, but an actual readable genetic code, giving unparalleled insight into ancient biology. The researchers went into an area of Greenland where they were surrounded by 2-million-year-old mounds of dirt, and then began taking core samples. There were no fossils or remnants of bone, but by testing the soil, they were able to identify some actual strands of DNA. The special factor in Greenland, which allows DNA to survive for so long, are both the cold and minerals in the soil, which actually bind to the DNA and help to preserve it within the soil. It's unknown exactly where this DNA came from, but likely from one of any number of sources, as living creatures are shedding DNA constantly. Some of this, likely from excrement, was preserved inside the soil for 2 million years to eventually be discovered by these Danish researchers. Next is the Microcontinent. It's estimated only 5% of the ocean has been observed, but that number is rapidly growing as scientists continue mapping the seafloor and making new discoveries. For instance, it was just recently discovered that there is in fact a microcontinent between Greenland and Canada, as a result of Greenland and Canada splitting apart, leading to the formation of the Davis Strait. This microcontinent began to be formed from the left-behind tectonic plate, now known as the Davis Strait microcontinent. This seems to indicate that tectonic plates are not solid masses, but can in fact fuse, split, and calve to form entirely new continents. Now, this isn't quite a full continent, in fact it's still a proto-microcontinent, but in another few million years this could very well become its own independent tectonic plate, influencing our world in as of yet unknown ways. Now, we won't be around to see it, and the formation has already been ongoing for 30 to 60 million years, but it is fascinating to understand that the world around us is continuing to change, that there is no end of history, and even if we're all gone, the fascinating tectonic movements of plates will continue on the Earth's crust. Next are new Greenland bears. Researchers were tasked with conducting a census and analysis of the polar bear population of Greenland, a population that is increasingly under threat. They would discover something totally different from their expectations though. Instead of the assumed single amorphous population covering the entire eastern coastline, it actually turns out there are two distinct and discrete polar bear populations in Greenland. The northeastern population has always been the most studied and most observed, as they're closest to human settlements, and it was assumed that they were emblematic of bears everywhere on the landmass, but this is not so. There's a southeastern population of bears that live among the mountainous and dangerous fjords in the south. This area is highly remote and heavily isolated, with no human habitation existing in the area, which of course made investigation and research quite difficult, but not impossible. So researchers spent several months tracking and even tagging polar bears in this harsh environment. Shockingly, there were quite high densities of polar bears in the fjords, something which truly surprised the researchers as they did not expect such a healthy and robust population. After years of study, it was eventually observed that these bears hunted differently than the others, and almost never actually went out onto the sea ice, the traditional hunting ground of polar bears. This is because their sea ice is simply so fragmented and dangerous that it's no longer a viable environment for them to hunt within. These bears are a distinct population and likely haven't genetically mingled with the northern population for well over 200 years. Given enough time, these bears could well become their very own species. Next is the ice melange. Ice melt is a concerning trend in the world's climate, as melting ice raises sea levels and releases even more CO2, worsening the greenhouse effect and impacting ocean currents as well as coastlines and ecosystems throughout the world. But scientists just discovered a rather concerning addition to the threat. It turns out significantly more Arctic ice sheet, especially around Greenland, has melted than we thought. In fact, it's shed about a fifth more of its ice mass in the last 4 decades than scientists thought it had. This is seriously concerning, as it seems to indicate the issue is already significantly worse than we had believed, and we believed it to be near catastrophic already. Many are saying the Arctic ice sheet is now beyond saving, and the best we can hope for is to mitigate the potential devastation and hold on for the ride. Of 207 glaciers studied in the report, 179 of them experienced a significant reduction in size since 1985. Most of this ice loss actually comes from below the water level, where it's harder to track and where warm water currents can carve up the glacier. The rate of glacier calving from the ice sheet has also increased significantly. And finally is an ancient tundra. Researchers spent weeks making their way to a buried mountain, then proceeded to carve through 2 miles of ice sheet before getting down to the dirt below. Once they got there, they were stunned to discover several fascinating fossils from a bygone age where the ice sheet around Greenland had actually melted and exposed the soil beneath, leading to a flourishing tundra ecosystem. But as the ancient ice melted, it also raised the sea level, meaning only the tallest points of Greenland were left above water, making it almost a sort of archipelago. They found some fossilized mosses and other fungi, as well as Arctic willow, but even more interestingly, they discovered an insect's leg and a compound eye, giving an excellent view into the small creatures in the ancient Greenland landmass. However, this has raised a lot of fears that a similar melting of the ice could lead to the same ecosystem. Now, to be fair, in 2,000 years, the ecosystem would recover and diversify beautifully, but that doesn't really make the people living along the coastline feel any better about losing their home.
Here's something you probably wouldn't be expecting to see on this list: ancient camels. Believe it or not, camels actually first appeared in North America more than 40 million years ago. Over time, they split into 2 main groups: the camels we know today and the relatives, llamas and alpacas. The camels made their way across the Bering Land Bridge, while llamas and alpacas moved south. But there was another species, the Camelops hasturnus, which stuck around in North America until the Ice Age. Some of these camels roamed as far south as Honduras, while others made it all the way to Alaska and the Yukon. In 2008, gold miners in Alaska discovered some Ice Age bones, which turned out to belong to this extinct camel species. The bones were so well preserved in the cold that researchers managed to extract DNA. Imagine a 6-foot-long beaver weighing 220 pounds. Ice Age giant beavers had 6-inch long front teeth. They would have looked like fierce predators, but they didn't eat meat. This massive rodent was about the size of a black bear and had a tail that resembled a muskrat's rather than today's typical beaver tail. A 2019 study looked at fossils from the Yukon and Ohio dating back 10,000 to 50,000 years and revealed that the giant beaver's diet consisted mostly of aquatic plants. Tessa Plint, a researcher with Heriot-Watt University, explained that by studying the chemical makeup of fossilized bones and teeth, scientists can figure out what an animal ate even tens of thousands of years later. Understanding the diet of these ancient animals helps them learn more about how climate change affected them. As the earth warmed and dried, the giant beaver couldn't compete with smaller, more adaptable beavers that survived. In 2010, a team of Russian scientists found a well-preserved mammoth in Siberia, later named Yuka. She was a young mammoth, about 6 to 8 years old, and she lived around 39,000 years ago. Yuka's body was in really good shape. Its Its body measured about 2.5 meters long, and it was remarkably intact, with her trunk, bones, some of her flesh, hair, and eyes still preserved, making her one of the most well-preserved mammoth specimens ever found. Pretty incredible to see. I haven't seen it in person, but based on pictures and video that I've seen of it, it's crazy how well-preserved it is. They think she might have fallen into a mud pit or drowned, which helped preserve her so well. People probably butchered her for meat, too, as there were cut marks on her bones. In 2002, an amazing discovery was made in northern Siberia. The remains of a woolly mammoth were found frozen in the permafrost near the Siberian village of Yukagir. The specimen, which was an adult male, turned out to be in remarkable condition. This mammoth's head, still covered in skin, was so well preserved that it looked almost fresh. When polar explorer Bernard Bouygues heard about the find, he led a team to retrieve the mammoth's remains. The team made 3 trips to the site, carefully gathering pieces of the mammoth's body and putting them together. Gave scientists a ton of information about woolly mammoths. For example, they discovered that the mammoth had temporal glands between its eyes and ears. These glands would have helped regulate body temperature. The mammoth's feet were also a key find. The soles had deep cracks in it, which would have helped the animal grip icy surfaces while walking. The specimen also included the tusks, front legs, and even parts of the stomach and intestines. Based on the size of its bones and tusks, scientists estimated that this mammoth was over 9 feet tall at the shoulder and weighed around 4 to 5 tons. Scimitar cats, or homotheriums, were fierce prehistoric predators. Their fossils are rare. Because of this, scientists used to think that they were part of a small population. That changed in 2011 when a bone was found in permafrost at a mining site near Dawson City in Canada. This bone belonged to a scimitar cat, not a saber-toothed cat, which are often confused with scimitar cats. Scimitar cats had shorter, curved teeth that were serrated, unlike the long, flat teeth of saber-tooths. What made this find even more exciting was how well preserved the bone was in the ice. Researchers at the University of Copenhagen were able to sequence the entire genome from this bone. Their genetic makeup hints towards a scimitar-toothed cats as being highly skilled hunters, said Michael Westbury, an evolutionary genomicist at the University of Copenhagen. Going on to say they, quote, likely had very good daytime vision and displayed complex social behaviors, end quote. These cats also had adaptations for endurance. Their bones and cardiovascular systems were strong. They were built for long distance running. And based on this, researchers believe scimitar cats hunted in packs, wearing down their prey during the day. Scientists estimated the specimen was over 47,500 years old. Scimitar cats likely went extinct around 10,000 years ago, along with many of the animals that they hunted, like mammoths and woolly rhinos. Most people think of hyenas as the scavengers of Africa, but the ancient Arctic also had its share of these creatures as well. These ancient hyenas lived over 5 million years ago, and its remains have been found around the world, from Mongolia to Kansas to Mexico. In 2019, evolutionary biologist Jack Sang analyzed a pair of fossilized hyena teeth from the Yukon. He quickly identified them as belonging to a species that once roamed the ancient Arctic. These teeth likely belonged to a hyena that lived around 850,000 to 1.4 million years ago. This hyena was equipped with teeth perfect for crushing bones, probably feeding on ancient caribou, bison, and maybe even baby mammoths. Eventually, these hyenas disappeared, and researchers think they were outcompeted by other Ice Age predators like the short-faced bear or bone-crushing dog. Never heard of those before till today. What an awesome name. In 2018, miners working at Hester Creek in the Yukon discovered a mummified squirrel, perfectly preserved from around 30,000 years before. At first, this lump of fur, claws, and limbs didn't look like much, but scientists examined it more and realized that they'd found an Arctic ground squirrel that had died during hibernation. Researchers nicknamed the squirrel Hester after the area where it was discovered, and it's amazing to think that this little guy was running around the Yukon several thousand years ago, said museum representatives. When the mummified squirrel was first found, its exact identity wasn't clear until the team noticed little hands, claws, and a tail. Grant Zazula, a paleontologist from the Yukon government, was part of the team that studied the squirrel, saying, "It's not quite recognizable until you see those little hands and these claws, and you see a little tail, and then you see ears." The team figured that Hester was likely hibernating when it died. Arctic ground squirrels curl up into balls like this, one when they hibernate in underground dens. often lined with nests made of leaves. These nests are usually found empty, so finding one with an actual squirrel inside was pretty cool. To avoid damaging the specimen, they decided not to unravel the ball of fur. Instead, they had it x-rayed by a local veterinarian who'd expected the bones to be in pretty bad condition, but when the x-ray results came in, the squirrel's skeleton was actually in great condition, and it looks nearly identical to a modern Arctic ground squirrel. In 2021, scientists discovered a tiny microscopic creature that had been frozen in Siberian permafrost for over 24,000 years. The team found it buried 11.5 feet deep. The little animal was what's called a belloid rotifer, and despite being frozen solid for thousands of years, it actually came back to life, and on top of that, it was still able to reproduce. Rotifers are tough little creatures. They typically live in freshwater or moist soil and are known for surviving in extreme conditions like radiation, dehydration, low oxygen, and freezing temperatures. To confirm its age, scientists radiocarbon dated the soil surrounding the critter. Stas Malaven, a co-author of the study, couldn't believe it, saying, "We revived animals that saw woolly mammoths," which is quite impressive. I agree. Next on the list we have Sanek. In 2021, there was a pretty amazing discovery in Greenland, a new dinosaur. New in that we didn't know it existed, not a living dinosaur, sadly. Researchers identified a previously unknown dinosaur species based on well-preserved skulls. This newfound species was named Otsi Sanek, meaning cold bone in Greenlandic Inuit. The remains of this creature date back to the late Triassic period, about 214 million years ago. The skulls were first found in 1994, and at the time they were believed to belong to a Plateosaurus, but recent advancements in research techniques, including micro-CT scans, showed that these skulls actually belonged to a different dino altogether, a dinosaur that was different from any known species. To visualize the full form of the skulls, researchers used digital modeling after the micro-CT scans. These were bipedal herbivores, medium-sized, and shared a lot of similarities with sauropods. Those are those long-necked, giraffe-looking dinosaurs you probably remember from Jurassic Park. But the Otsi Sanek would have been a lot smaller than them. They're pretty cool-looking dinosaurs, almost like a sauropod mixed with a velociraptor, at least to me. In 2016, scientists discovered a 12,400-year-old mummified puppy. This puppy was discovered in the permafrost along a river in Siberia. Researchers believe the puppy died in a landslide, and its body became preserved in the ice. Its fur was intact, and the body, from its nose to its tail, was almost completely preserved. The only part that wasn't in perfect condition was the brain, which had started to decompose, but even still, about 70 to 80% of the brain was still intact. This puppy is one of the few animals in the Pleistocene era which has a well-preserved brain. While there have been other dog fossils found from the same time period, they were too decomposed to study. The puppy's condition is especially special because its brain could help researchers learn more about ancient animals. In fact, they were saying at the time that they could potentially use the DNA and tissues from this puppy to bring it back to life, which would have been nuts. Along with the frozen puppy, human tools were found near the site, meaning that this dog was domesticated and owned by people. In March of 2011, Sean Funk, a shovel operator at a mine in Fort McMurray, Alberta, was digging when he made an amazing discovery. A discovery that turned out to be Alberta's oldest dinosaur fossil and one of the best preserved ever found in the entire world. Honestly, this has to be the most amazing dinosaur discovery that I've ever read about. And I think Don Henderson, curator of dinosaurs at the Royal Tyrrell Museum, agrees, saying at the time, "Right away we knew it was going to be something good, but we had no idea how good it was going to be." So after getting the fossil back to the museum, Don and his team got to work, and 6 years later, the dinosaur was named Borealopelta markmichelli. The name Borealopelta means shield of the north, and the species name honors Mark Mitchell, the museum technician who spent over 7,000 grueling hours removing the dinosaur from rock. Now, I'm not done with this one. There's just too much to talk about with this discovery to cram it into one point. So as I said, the Borealopelta was incredibly well preserved. It was covered in thick armor, especially around its neck. It also had these massive 20-inch spikes at the shoulders that were assumed to be for fighting, but Victoria Arbour, a curator of paleontology, also thought they might have been a display of health and strength, similar to the horns of a bull or tusks of an elephant. Now here's what's utterly pretty crazy to me though. This dinosaur was so intact, they were able to see what was in its stomach. There were twigs and ferns in there, suggesting it ate during the wet season. Scientists think it could have been swept away by a flash flood, eventually sinking to the bottom of the sea. The body would have flipped over and sank, with its thick back and bloated belly causing it to be preserved in sediment, creating a natural time capsule that kept it safe for 110 million years. Here's another crazy thing about this find though. They were even able to determine, to a certain degree, what color the creature was. Most of the fossil was covered in relatively well-preserved skin, and from this, they were able to study pigment cells called melanosomes. Melanosomes are seen in nature all the time. It's what gives many modern-day animals unique markings like spots and stripes. It's rare to see melanosomes in fossils, but again, Borealopelta was especially well preserved. At least one component of Borealopelta's color was this reddish brown, said Caleb Brown from the Royal Tyrrell Museum. The color on its back may have been part of a camouflage pattern called countershading, helping it blend into its environment and avoid predators. Now, also in 2011, a team of paleontologists led by William Hammer discovered a new species of ancient dinosaur in the frozen mountains of Antarctica, an area that's usually thought of as one of the coldest places on Earth, but of course, millions of years ago, it was much warmer. The dinosaur was small, around 4 to 5 feet long, and had bird-like hip bones. It was likely related to early plant eaters like the Furbosaur and Heterodontosaur, which were the ancestors of larger and more famous dinos like Stegosaurus and Ankylosaurus. The fossils were found on Mount Kirkpatrick, part of the central transatlantic mountains. Hammer and his team uncovered a leg and foot, but they weren't sure if they had found the dinosaur's head. It would take about a year to fully understand what they'd found. Thomas Holtz, a geology professor at the University of Maryland, noted that the find could help fill gaps in both dinosaur evolution and the ancient Antarctic environment, saying that this discovery was from a time when dinosaurs were just starting to take over, comparing these early small plant eaters to rabbits, fast, common, and without armor, but important to the overall evolution of the giant plant eaters that came later. Finding fossils in Antarctica is extremely challenging because of the harsh conditions and short research window. Hammer had been trying to return to the site since 1990, but bad weather and helicopter problems cut short his 2003 trip. As Holtz put it, anytime we find fossils there, it's a brand new species. It's practically unexplored territory. So these weren't the only dino remains William Hammer discovered in the mountains of Antarctica. In 1990, he and his team discovered a 22-foot meat-eating dinosaur called Cryolophosaurus. This was a big deal because it was the first dinosaur ever found in Antarctica. Cryolophosaurus was a meat-eating dinosaur that lived around 190 million years ago during the early Jurassic period. It was about 20 to 23 feet long, 6 to 7 meters, and weighed roughly 1,000 pounds. What really sets this dinosaur apart was its unique crest. The crest, found on the top of its head, had a very unusual shape, kind of like a frozen backwards mohawk. There are like two kind of things here. It's believed that the crest could have been used for display, either to attract mates or to communicate with other members of its species. As Hammer put it, it looked like a frozen crested reptile, which is how they got the name Cryolophosaurus, meaning frozen crested lizard. And again, in the early 1990s, William Hammer of Augustana College discovered more incredible fossils on Mount Kirkpatrick. These particular fossils included parts of a foot, leg, and ankle bones from a long-necked dinosaur that lived around 190 million years ago. It wasn't until much later, though, that the fossil was identified. The fossils were painstakingly removed from the ice and rock using jackhammers, rock saws, and chisels under extremely difficult conditions, said Nathan Smith, a graduate student at the Field Museum in Chicago. After a lot of hard work, Smith and paleontologist Diego Pohl realized they'd found a new species of dinosaur, which they named Glacialosaurus hammeri. This dinosaur was about 20 to 25 feet long and would have weighed between 4 to 6 tons. It belonged to a group called Sauropodomorphs, which includes some of the largest dinosaurs ever. Think of those massive-sized, long-necked plant eaters. Around 20,000 years ago, a young woolly rhinoceros was going about its day in what's now northern Siberia. It was probably foraging for food when it made an oopsie and drowned in a river. Fast forward to 2020, and that same woolly rhino became a huge discovery for scientists. As rising temperatures cause permafrost to melt, creatures like this long extinct rhino are being uncovered, giving researchers a glimpse into prehistoric times. Permafrost is a layer of soil that's been frozen for thousands of years, great for preserving ancient remains. The woolly rhino's carcass was found by a local farmer in Yakutia, Siberia, about 15,000 years after the species went extinct. The fossil was incredibly well preserved, with its fur, hooves, and internal organs still intact. But what made this discovery even more special was the rhino's horn, which is rarely found in such good condition because cartilage usually decomposes relatively quickly. In 2018, a local man named Pavel Efimov made an incredible discovery in Siberia: the severed head of a giant wolf, perfectly preserved beneath the permafrost. But this wolf was nearly 40,000 years old. It wasn't until 2019 that researchers started studying it in detail. The big question they were trying to answer was whether the wolf's head had been chopped off by humans or separated by ice. The cut on the wolf's neck wasn't what you'd expect from ice separation. It was rougher, less smooth, meaning it might have been made by something like a tool. The severed head is quite large, measuring about 40 centimeters, much bigger than the typical 25 centimeter head of a modern Siberian wolf. It had a thick mammoth-like coat, sharp fangs, and some parts of its skull seemed more developed than today's wolves. In 2016, ornithologist Stephen Emsley made a surprising find during a research trip in Antarctica. He stumbled on ancient penguin remains at Cape Urzar near the Ross Sea, and what he discovered there was unlike anything he'd seen before. Now, at first, Emsley was researching ancient penguin remains at the site, following a lead about penguin droppings. He didn't expect to find much, since explorers like Robert Falcon Scott and Ernest Shackleton hadn't recorded any penguin sightings in the area. But when Emsley arrived, he found something unexpected: white splotchy guano stains and loose chick bones, which usually indicate that a penguin colony had recently occupied the site, but that wasn't the case. Investigating further, he found complete penguin chick carcasses and even intact mummies. The site must have been covered by snow and ice soon after the colony was last abandoned, preserving the surface remains for centuries, Emsley went on to write. The site had been used by penguins at different times in the past, with carbon dating showing it was occupied 3 times starting around 5,000 years ago. The site's location and the penguins' repeated visits were likely because of changing ice conditions, which would open and close the coast to the penguins. Emsley believes that this area could potentially see penguins returning in the future as climate change melts the sea ice earlier each summer, giving them access to the coast again. In 2018, some fossil ivory hunters in northeastern Siberia made a pretty cool discovery. While digging into the permafrost, they unearthed the carcass of a bird, but this bird was a 46,000-year-old specimen, perfectly frozen in time. The discovery was sent to paleontologist Love Dallin and a team of researchers at the Swedish Museum of Natural History. The bird is believed to be an ancestor of the horned lark, which is found in places like northern Russia and Mongolia today. It's a cool find though, the first bird of its kind ever to be discovered. The fact that the bird was almost completely intact made it one of the best preserved ancient animals ever found. The bird was found near Balayagora, a village in Yakutia, an area known as the Pole of Cold because of its extremely cold winters, sometimes reaching as low as -60 degrees Fahrenheit, which is roughly -50 degrees Celsius. That is just too cold. The researchers think that the end of the last ice age led to the formation of a new subspecies of animals like this bird. The discovery adds to a list of well-preserved creatures found in the same area, like a 42,000-year-old foal and an 18,000-year-old puppy, both of which I've talked about in previous videos. In 2007 and 2008, 2 baby mammoths, later named Lyuba and Chroma, were found in Siberia. They were so well preserved that researchers were able to piece together how they died, even though both calves, one about 1 month old and the other 2 months old, died more than 40,000 years ago. Scientists used CT scans to find that the 2 mammoths probably choked on mud after falling into water. Daniel Fisher, a co-author of the study, stated the mud was like a really thick batter, that they got clogged in their trachea and they were unable to dislodge by coughing. Basically preserved them from taking another breath. Lyuba and the 1-month-old calf was discovered by a reindeer herder. Chroma was found in 2008, frozen upright in permafrost. Scavengers had eaten parts of her heart, lungs, and skull. But both mummies still showed a neonatal line on their teeth, a marker of stress during birth, which helped scientists estimate their ages. CT scans of Lyuba showed signs of what's called a mammalian dive reflex, showing that she fell through the ice into a muddy lake where she tried to clear the mud from her airways but eventually suffocated. Chroma, who had a belly full of breast milk, also had mud in her trachea, but her death is a bit less cut and dry. But according to researchers, it's possible she fell into a river, broke her back, and was then buried in mud while trying to escape. In 2015, scientists in Siberia discovered a baby woolly rhino, perfectly preserved in a frozen riverbank. Nicknamed Sasha after the man who found it, the rhino calf is the most complete specimen of its kind ever discovered. Sasha lived around 10,000 years ago, was about 1.5 meters long, or almost 5 feet, and 0.8 meters high, about 2.6 feet, much smaller than the fully grown adults, which could reach up to 15 feet long. According to Albert Protopopov from the Yakutian Academy of Sciences, baby woolly rhinos are incredibly rare to find, so this was a pretty amazing discovery, especially because it helps researchers learn more about the early life of these animals, which they didn't really know much about before. Woolly rhinos went extinct around 10,000 years ago. Climate change and habitat loss likely led to their extinction, but some scientists also think overhunting may have been a part of it. Around 30,000 years ago in Siberia, a tiny cave lion cub was making its way across the tundra when a sudden mudslide or crack in the permafrost caused the cub to fall and get trapped. The cub was buried in ice, preserving her fur, skin, and organs in almost perfect condition. This poor cub, later named Sparta, was discovered by mammoth tusk hunters in 2017, poking out of the melting permafrost in Yakutia, Siberia. Sparta is probably the best preserved Ice Age animal ever found, said Love Dallin, one of the study's co-authors, going on to say that even her whiskers were preserved. Sparta died about 28,000 years ago, and she was actually found alongside another cub named Boris, who was even older, dying around 43,000 years ago. Both cubs were about 1 to 2 months old when they died, with their sharp teeth just starting to emerge. Cave lions were closely related to modern African lions and lived across the northern hemisphere during the Ice Age. Unlike today's lions, though, these were, of course, adapted to freezing cold weather. In 2020, a perfectly preserved bear mummy was discovered in the Siberian permafrost. Siberia again. But anyway, it wasn't quite what scientists expected. At first, researchers thought they'd found the remains of a giant extinct cave bear, but eventually they realized the bear was much younger and from a completely different species. The bear was found by reindeer herders on a remote island in the East Siberian Sea. It was so well preserved that scientists could still see its skin, fur, claws, teeth, nose, internal organs, and even body fat. The remains were named the Etherican bear after a nearby river. At first, researchers at the Lazarev Mammoth Museum believed the bear was a cave bear, a massive species that went extinct about 22,000 years ago, but this bear was only about 3,460 years old. Turned out to be a young female brown bear standing just over 5 feet tall and weighing around 172 pounds. It was probably around 2 to 3 years old when it died. The bear's stomach contents revealed it had been eating plants and birds, with feathers still found inside its belly, which is incredible when you think about it. It also had signs of spinal injuries, which may have contributed to its death. In 2016, a gold miner in Yukon, Canada discovered something frozen in the ice. It turned out to be an ancient wolf pup, which had been almost perfectly preserved for 57,000 years. The mummified gray wolf, known as Zur, was found in the Klondike gold fields near Dawson City. Lead researcher Julie Machin, an anatomy professor, called it, quote, the most complete wolf specimen ever found from the Ice Age, going on to say all her soft tissue, her hair, her skin, even her little nose is still there. She's just complete, and that is really rare. Using radiocarbon dating and DNA analysis, scientists confirmed Zur died at just 7 weeks old. The remains were especially important because they were discovered in North America, unlike most finds in Siberia, as you've seen from this list, which are harder to access. Michelle and her team were able to link Zer's DNA to both ancient Beringian wolves from Yukon and Russian grey wolves, which means that ancient wolves from North America and Eurasia mixed. Zer's remains also showed them what Ice Age wolves ate. The assumption had always been that they mostly ate bison or oxen, but as it turned out, this wolf mostly consumed aquatic animals, much like modern wolves in Alaska. In 2011, members of a tribe in northern Siberia found the remains of a steppe bison, perfectly preserved after being frozen for nearly 10,000 years. The bison was transported to the Yakutian Academy of Sciences, where scientists began to study it. Unlike other bison mummies discovered over the years, this one was almost entirely intact, with its internal organs in remarkable condition. Olga Potapova, collections curator at the Mammoth site of Hot Springs, explained that while bison mummies are not uncommon, they're usually incomplete, saying, quote, "Normally what you find with mummies of megafauna is partial carcasses, but this mummy was preserved so well that it earned a record for the level of its preservation." The bison, which was probably about 4 years old when it died, looked like it had starved to death. There was no fat around its abdomen, but its heart and digestive systems were pretty intact, even though some organs had shrunk over time. Researchers even managed to extract tissue samples from each organ, and for the first time ever, they found steppe bison brain tissue still preserved. In 2022, a nearly perfectly mummified baby woolly mammoth was discovered by a miner in the permafrost of Canada's Klondike goldfields, dating back around 30,000 years. The calf, thought to be around 1 month old when it died, was a female and measured just 4.5 feet long. Researchers described it as the most complete mummified mammoth found in North America. A lot of its skin and hair was still intact. As an Ice Age paleontologist, it had been one of my lifelong dreams to come face to face with a real woolly mammoth, said Grant Zazula, a paleontologist with the Yukon government, going on to describe the mammoth as, quote, "one of the most incredible mummified Ice Age animals ever discovered in the world." The discovery happened when a mine worker hit something unexpected while digging. The team stopped all their work and brought in geologists who managed to recover the mammoth's remains, and just in time because a storm had been rolling in. Analysis suggested that the mammoth may have died after getting trapped in mud while grazing, with grass found in her stomach. In 2018, yet another incredible discovery was made in Siberia. The nearly perfectly preserved mummified remains of an Ice Age horse, believed to have died between 30,000 and 40,000 years ago. Its body was so well preserved that even tiny details like the hairs in its nostrils and around its hooves were still visible. The foal was found deep in a crater, about 328 feet or 100 meters deep, during an expedition in Yakutia. It was around 2 months old when it died. The mummified body was almost entirely intact, with no visible damage. Scientists collected samples from the foal's hair and tissue and found it belonged to an extinct species known as the Lena horse, which was genetically distinct from the wild horses that still roam the area today. This species lived in Siberia tens of thousands of years ago and disappeared long before modern horses evolved. In 2016, biologist Steve Emsley was in southern Antarctica when he came across something kind of confusing. It looked to be a recently abandoned Adelie penguin colony. There were mummified chicks, guano stains, pebbles from nests, but the thing is, Adelie penguins hadn't been spotted in the region for centuries. What Emsley soon discovered was that the penguin remains were far older than anyone could have imagined. Radiocarbon dating of the bones, eggshells, and mummified skin showed that these penguins had been dead for thousands of years. The rapidly melting ice in Antarctica revealed these ancient penguin remains. The penguins had likely settled in the area during warmer periods when the sea ice melted early, allowing the birds to reach the area and build their nests. The most recent colony, which had been buried during the Little Ice Age about 800 years ago, was finally uncovered as the region's ice began to recede. What you're looking at here is a tardigrade, aka a water bear. Now, is this a newly discovered alien species? Well, I wish, but no. These things actually exist right here at home. They're just really, really tiny, which I'm thankful for, because imagine if that alien-looking thing was the size of just even a regular house cat. That would just be horrifying. Tardigrades, nicknamed water bears, are one of the most resilient animals on the planet. They're microscopic animals that are known for their ability to survive in very extreme conditions all over the world. In places like Antarctica, they've been found frozen in ice for thousands of years. And what's amazing about these things is their ability to go into a kind of state of suspended animation. When conditions are harsh, like extreme cold or dryness, tardigrades dry out or freeze and enter a kind of hibernation. And when researchers thaw them out, they can come back to life. Water bears have even survived space travel in this dormant state. This makes them one of the toughest known organisms in the world.
Coming in at number 10 is the Iceman. The mummy of Otsi, aka the Iceman, was found in 1991 in the Otsi Alps, Italy. It's believed that the Iceman belonged to 3000 BCE and his body was preserved because of the glacier that surrounded him after he died. Evidence suggests that he had his life ended by someone due to presence of several wounds and an arrowhead embedded in his shoulder. His life and the circumstances surrounding his death remain among the most significant European mysteries. Now, however, soon after his discovery, people who were involved with his discovery began to die due to violent accidents. Forensic pathologist Rainer Henn died in a horrific car accident, mountaineer Kurt Fritz died in an avalanche, and hiker Helmut Simon died after falling off a dangerous hidden path. The Iceman then claimed 3 more lives in quick succession between 2004 and 2005. Now, it's thought that anyone who comes into contact with the Iceman will die, and people believe that the discovery of the Iceman is a curse and has the power to destroy mankind. All I'm saying is I would never get close to him. Number 9. Viruses. One major fear of global warming is that it could release unknown pathogens into the air, some of which may have the capacity to seriously hinder and endanger humanity. Now, a lung sample from a woman's body exhumed in 1997 from permafrost in a village on the seaward peninsula of Alaska contained genomic material from the influenza strain responsible for the 1918 pandemic. In 2012, scientists confirmed the 300-year-old mummified remains of a woman buried in Siberia contained the genetic signatures of the virus that causes smallpox. An anthrax outbreak in Siberia that affected dozens of humans and more than 2,000 reindeer between July and August in 2016 has also been linked to the deeper thawing of permafrost during exceptionally hot summers, allowing old spores of Bacillus anthracis to resurface from old burial grounds or animal carcasses. In 2015, researchers from China and the United States traveled to Galia ice cap in Tibet and drilled a 164-foot hole into the ice to study samples. What they found was no less than 33 different viruses, 28 of which had never been seen by human eyes. According to environmental virologist Chantal Abergel, we are very far from sampling the entire diversity of viruses on Earth. Now, that's positively unsettling considering there were 28 found in a Tibetan glacier alone. Number 8. Whiskey. Explorer Ernest Shackleton was one of the key figures in the heroic age of Antarctic exploration. Shackleton dreamed of being the first to reach the South Pole, but lost that race to Roald Amundsen, although that didn't stop him from exploring the icy region. One of his most heroic acts occurred after his ship, the Endurance, became stuck in ice. He saved each crew member with bravery, quick thinking, and strong leadership. Now, on another trip in 1909, Shackleton left behind 3 cases of scotch and 2 cases of brandy. He intended to enjoy the alcohol on his return, but sadly Shackleton never got the chance as he died of a heart attack on return to his voyage to Antarctica in 1921. Now, almost 100 years later, in 2010, workers in the Antarctic found Shackleton's bottles of alcohol frozen in the ice, aged to perfection. Number 7. Lake Vostok. In the late 1950s, the Soviet Union established the Vostok Station at the pole of cold on Princess Elizabeth Land in Antarctica. As researchers checked the thickness of the ice, they were shocked to discover Lake Vostok 13,000 feet below the ice surface. Russian scientists believe the lake was isolated roughly 15 to 25 million years ago. With a thick Antarctic sheet covering the lake, it remained untouched for centuries. Research on the ice and lake provided scientists with insight into the Earth's history. Now, the Russian team plans to eventually lower a probe into the lake to collect water samples and sediments from the bottom. It's hypothesized that unusual forms of life could be found in the lake's liquid layer, a fossil water reserve. Now, because Lake Vostok may contain an environment sealed off below the ice for millions of years, the conditions could resemble those of ice-covered oceans hypothesized to exist on Jupiter and Saturn's moon. Number 6. Yucca the mammoth. Yucca the mammoth is a mummified corpse of a juvenile female woolly mammoth that was found near and named after the village Yucca whose local people discovered it. This mammoth mummy was found as an overhanging ledge about 13 feet above the beach level in a low wave cut bluff that was about 16 feet high. Found in 2010, the mammoth died approximately 39,000 years ago. After its discovery, Yucca spent 2 years stored and preserved in a natural refrigerator, the local permafrost of Yucca. An analysis of the teeth and tusks determined Yucca to be approximately 6 to 8 years old when it died, coming in at about 5 tons. Now, although it's presumed that this mammoth had most likely been attacked by lions or other predators, evidence that the predators had killed the mammoth was not found. In March 2019, a Japanese researcher team led by Kazuo Yamagata, a biologist at Klondike University, worked with Yucca's tissue. Yamagata's team reported that they were able to simulate nucleus-like structures to perform some biological processes. However, they could not activate cell division. Yucca is now on display in Moscow, and it is quite creepy to say the least. It's considered the best preserved mammoth in the world, and you can clearly see why. Number 5. Mother-daughter mummies. In 2017, archaeologists found mummies buried in the Zelny Yar burial site near the Russian town of Scimitar. They found 2 mummies, one adult woman and the other her daughter. These mummies are estimated to be 900 years old and are said to be part of an unknown medieval culture. The interesting thing was that the female mummy is the only female in the burial ground, leading some to assume that she was an elite member of society. It's also interesting and creepy because only her head has been preserved. On the head you can still see her hair and eyelashes, and her face has a green tint due to the copper she was buried in. By finding this, the team who found them will be better able to understand the little known civilization that lived in this region between the 8th and 13th centuries. Between the 8th and 13th centuries AD. Alexander Gustav, expedition leader, said the remains were found near one of the 3 monuments at Zelny Yar. They were buried in a north-south direction, their feet facing a river, the significance of which is thought to be religious. Now, who these people were and how they ended up on the edge of the Arctic is not known, but previous DNA analysis has shown them to have links to Persia. Researchers are currently working to connect the civilization to local indigenous populations living in the region today. Number 4. Fish. The freezing of an animal, insect, or fish can happen at any moment when the temperature suddenly drops and everything begins to freeze. Now, this is what happened when 2 brothers went fishing on a Wawasee Lake in Indiana a few years ago after a cold snap. They made a startling, bizarre, and mysterious discovery. They found a pike frozen in the ice of the lake. Now, in most cases, a frozen fish isn't a big deal. However, the pike died in the middle of eating a bass. The most probable theory suggests that the pike choked on the bass, died, and was frozen in time. The 2 fish entwined together forever. Now, at first, nobody believed the 2 brothers on social media. Most assumed it to be a special effect or joke, but they released graphic footage of them cutting the pike and half-eaten bass out of the ice, much to the surprise of their followers. Now, it's unknown how long it was frozen for, but I can't imagine finding something like that. Number 3. Dinosaur bones. It turns out that many dinosaur bones have been found in the frozen tundra of the Antarctic. The first were discovered in 1986 by Argentinian geologists Eduardo Olivero and Roberto Sasco, who unearthed remains of the ankylosaur. These bones were found on James Ross Island and were bones of a Tyrannosaurus. Other dinosaurs are continuously found in Antarctica as well, but it's not like these dinosaurs were roaming on an icy landscape. Antarctica as we know it only formed about 25 million years ago, long after the dinosaurs had gone extinct. Before that, it was a part of the supercontinent called Gondwana, and it was actually quite tropical. Number 2. The meteorite. In 2021, research assistant Matthias van Gilken was working at the Belgian Princess Elizabeth Antarctica station when he made a shocking discovery. He discovered 13 black particles at the Ronan Mountains, Queen Maud Land, and East Antarctica. The scientists soon realized it was pieces of a meteorite. They theorized that the meteorite was barreling towards Earth roughly 430,000 years ago and exploded in the sky above East Antarctica when it entered the atmosphere. Then earlier in 2015, NASA scientists found a small meteorite that fell to Earth 13 years earlier, landing in the icy cold Antarctica. Now evidence suggests that the object contained microbes from Mars. And coming at number 1 is million-year-old DNA. In the fall of 2022, scientists announced that they uncovered million-year-old DNA just north of the continent of Antarctica. Scientists actually accidentally collected the unusual genetic samples up to 584 feet beneath the sea floor as part of a 2019 survey led by the International Ocean Discovery Program in the Scotia Sea north of mainland Antarctica. The ancient sediment that was discovered is now the oldest marine DNA found from seafloor sediments. The team looked closely at damage patterns within the recovered DNA fragments to establish exactly how old they were. Now the oldest fragments clocked in at around 1 million years old. Now until now, the oldest set of DNA, which was found locked inside Arctic permafrost, dated around 650,000 years ago. This DNA will be analyzed and studied by scientists, as it will tell us a lot about the polar marine ecosystem as well as how climate change may affect Antarctica.
Number 10. Dinosaur. When it comes to big things, dinosaurs were pretty damn big. Scientists were able to uncover the fossilized remains of a new and unknown species of dinosaur underneath the ice sheets in Greenland. When the dinosaurs were alive, the Earth was a lot warmer and more tropical, these fossils becoming trapped under the ice when the climate changed into the Ice Age. The skull they found is thought to be a two-legged plant-eating dinosaur of medium size, and they dubbed the new species Issy-Sinique. The dinosaur is believed to have grown to the size of 10 to 30 feet, and the skull they found is thought to be that of a younger dinosaur that had not fully grown yet. They used computer technology to create 3D scans of the head before sending the specimens to the Natural History Museum in Denmark, as they have sovereignty over the country of Greenland. It is the first known dinosaur to have been native to Greenland and is thought to come from the late Triassic period around 200 million years ago. Number 9. Bison. The massive carcass of a bison known as a steppe bison was found by a gold mining family in Alaska way back in 1979. They were using a mining hose and were melting a frozen block of ice, effectively thawing out the creature that had become trapped inside. The bison species is from the Ice Age, and the body that they found is thought to be tens of thousands of years old. Once they were finally able to fully excavate the body, they found other things alongside it, including hair, insects, wood, and different plants. When the pelt of the animal reacted to the soil around it, it turned the body blue, and so the bison ended up being dubbed Blue Babe. Analysis of the body showed it had died 36,000 years ago, a result of being attacked by an Ice Age lion. The ice allowed the creature to be incredibly well preserved, scientists even being able to find pockets of blood in the body. Number 8. Cave bear. This specimen found on an island in the Arctic was a very unique discovery, said to be one of the first of its kind. Researchers found a well-preserved body of a cave bear that was around 40,000 years old. Cave bears would grow to be around 7 feet long and typically weighed over 1,000 pounds in their adulthood. Before this discovery was made, they only knew about the animal from skulls and bones, and had never found a specimen that was this fully preserved. The body that they found had all of its organs still, and even still had its nose on its face, paired with its terrifyingly massive sharp teeth. According to one of Russia's leading Ice Age experts, the discovery of the body was of world importance and is the first and only find of its kind. The body was found by a group of reindeer herders on the island and was then sent around to various scientists to study the life of the animal. Number 7. Horned lark. Alright, some of these creatures aren't that big, but they're still pretty interesting, and size doesn't matter anyways. In 2018, fossil hunters were in the northeastern part of Siberia known as the Pole of Cold, and they were tunneling into the permafrost. deep underground, they discovered the body of a bird thought to be around 46,000 years old, but it was incredibly well preserved, and scientists say that it looks like it could have only died a few days ago. Researchers believe that it is the ancestor of the horned lark bird and is the first of its kind to have ever been discovered. It is also said to be one of the best preserved specimens ever discovered, as it was almost completely intact and still had all of its parts. The ice age that took place is thought to have generated many new species who adapted, and this is one of them. Siberia is home to a lot of frozen discoveries due to its freezing cold temperatures, and who knows what else is sitting in the ice, just waiting to be found. Number 6. Wolf. The Pleistocene era, or Ice Age, lasted from about 2 million to 11,000 years ago, and many great extinct creatures we've discovered come from this era. One of these discoveries was the head of a massive Ice Age era wolf that was still snarling 40,000 years after it had died. It was found in a cold region of Russia and is one of the first full-sized frozen wolves ever to be discovered. They found it in the summer of 2018, and it was described as having mammoth-like fur, sharp fangs, and was between the ages of 2 and 4 when it passed away. Because only the head was discovered, it only gave small clues towards the evolution of wolves and how they have changed and adapted over the years, but researchers were still able to reconstruct the head using 3D models and get a solid understanding of what these Ice Age wolves looked like. In fact, the specimen was so well preserved that it even still had parts of its brain. Number 5. Lion cubs. As I've mentioned before, Siberia is a place that is fairly popular for finding frozen specimens, and this time they didn't just find one animal, but instead 2 matching ones. They found 2 mummified cave lions that lived during the Ice Age around 30,000 years ago, giving them the names Sparta and Boris. They were found in 2017 and 2018 by mammoth tusk collectors, and one of the cubs was believed at the time to be the best preserved Ice Age animal ever found. It was originally thought that the 2 cubs they discovered were siblings, being only a few months old at the time of their death, but research showed that Boris had actually died about 15,000 years before Sparta. Sparta still had her fur, teeth, skin, organs, and even her whiskers, looking like she may have only recently died despite being a part of a species that went extinct over 10,000 years ago. If given the chance to grow up, the cubs would have managed to grow to 5 feet long and weigh almost 1,000 pounds. Number 4. Sharks. Creatures that are found frozen in ice don't always actually come from the Ice Age. There are plenty of cold places right now where animals can unfortunately become trapped, or pass away and then freeze. In Cape Cod, Massachusetts, it has become startlingly common for giant sharks to become frozen in the ice off the coast. A few years ago, they found a total of 4 different sharks that had all become frozen in the ice and passed away. The sharks were apparently becoming trapped in shallow waters during changing weather conditions, and sudden cold snaps would cause them to freeze and die. The thresher sharks that were commonly becoming trapped were apparently not a very well-studied species, so the bodies that were found were taken and thawed in order to be dissected and researched. The Atlantic White Shark Conservancy even went so far to refer to the specimens as sharksicles, but probably not something you'd want to eat on a hot day in the summer. Number 3. Mummies. Human remains are usually found when archaeologists dig up large graves and find skeletons, but in a rare case they managed to find the well-preserved and mummified body of a woman. A group of hikers exploring an Argentinian volcano found the body of a woman who appeared to have died around 500 years ago. The body was well preserved due to the incredibly high and cold elevation at which it was found. It's believed that the body was there as part of an ancient sacrificial ritual, and the woman, named the Inca Ice Maiden, was sacrificed. She was given lots of food and drink before being led up the volcano, where she was left to die of exposure. The discovery of her body was also incredibly important because from samples they took, they were able to discover that she was fighting tuberculosis, and these sorts of samples can help us work towards fighting these diseases in the modern day. Number 2. Foal. In the summer of 2018, they found what they called the best preserved Ice Age animal ever found. Feels like they say that a lot. Anyways, mammoth tusk hunters in Siberia found the body of an around 42,000-year-old horse foal, incredibly well preserved thanks to the cold temperatures. They say that it was only about 2 weeks old at the time of its death, and they were able to extract both blood and urine samples from it. The discovery apparently pushed scientists closer to the hope that they could bring these extinct creatures like mammoths back to life. I think we should listen to Jurassic Park's warnings and just deal with the animals we actually have right now. I know you might be thinking that a baby horse isn't some terrifying giant Ice Age creature, but full-grown horses are pretty big, okay, and they're actually kind of terrifying. I mean, they basically walk on one giant finger. It's creepy, and I don't like it. Number 1. Baby mammoth. During the Ice Age, mammoths were one of the biggest creatures around, basically being massive furry elephants. This young woolly mammoth specimen was found in, you guessed it, Siberia. This incredibly well-preserved body of a young female woolly mammoth named Yuka is said to have lived around 28,000 years ago, and they were discovered around a decade ago. Due to her good condition, scientists were eager to conduct experiments, and one of those was taking cells from her body. When they put the cells together, they found that they were still active, even almost 30,000 years later, so they managed to technically revive Yuka in a way. At full size, woolly mammoths were usually around 13 feet tall and would weigh around 13,000 pounds, or the same as around 26,000 large oranges if that helps you picture it.
In our number 10 spot, we have a frozen alien corpse. Scientists have discovered this frozen alien corpse in Russia. It was found by 2 people in Siberia after claims of a UFO came to Earth. Allegedly, it was missed by the Russian military after they cleaned up the area after the crash. The corpse was pretty damaged, but the being was 2 feet high and part of his right leg was missing. Also, apparently this particular area in Russia is a hotspot for UFO sightings, and there are a number of reports of sightings every single year. In fact, there was a sighting that reported seeing a UFO crash in the area, and so the finding of this alien corpse aligns with that sighting. Whoa, I want to go to Siberia now. If there is anyone watching from Russia, from Siberia, please tell us of any other sightings that you may have come across in the comment section below. In our number 9 spot, we have traces of potential alien DNA. Scientists have recently discovered traces of DNA outside some of the Antarctic caves, which could suggest alien life. From algae DNA to small animals, there was so much evidence to support the idea that perhaps there once was a lot more living species in Antarctica. They did not come across any animals in the caves at the time, but they still found this to be a great discovery and have reason to believe that they will discover more evidence as they continue their search, or perhaps alien life might be underneath the ice sheets as there are warm temperatures coming from underneath the sheets, and that would suggest that it might be a place they could easily live in. In our number 8 spot, we have UFO discovered. That's right, in October of 2020, satellite photos of Antarctica were taken that had many people stop in their tracks. Surrounded by ice and snow, and with some ice still on it, we see an object that looks like half of a flying saucer that is also a bit raised, casting a shadow around it. As the ice sheets continue to melt around the world, it is believed that is why it has now been revealed, and it is also believed that this is potentially an aircraft from thousands if not millions of years ago. According to experts, Antarctica would be a great place for aliens to go to because of how sterile it is, so it would make sense to land there. Of course, this is all speculation and there's nothing further on this discovery at this time. In our number 7 spot, we have the Alaskan alien. On January 3rd, 1989, NASA's Alaska York Station made a great discovery. They found an alien frozen in ice. Yep, an alien, just like you see in the movies with the great big eyes and bald head. Makes you wonder if perhaps the movies are showcasing these creatures the same because we've already discovered aliens and someone somewhere is telling illustrators to paint them a specific way. I wish I was someone that had pull to know all of this top secret information, although I guess if I was, then I wouldn't be able to make this video as I would probably have a target on my back. There is no other information on this discovery as it is considered top secret, but it is definitely a sign that alien life has been to this planet. In our number 6 spot, we have alien eggs.
In 2015, it was reported that two friends were walking along a frozen lake in Utah when they discovered the most peculiar thing. There was a strange formation in the middle of the lake that honestly gives me shivers to look at. If you are someone that feels uncomfortable looking at a bunch of dots together or eyeballs looking at you, definitely look away. This has the same sort of displeasing effect. Small holes were seen poking out from the ice with a strange formation lying underneath them. The theories around what this is include a UFO landing spot, something that aliens left when they visited Earth, and the popular theory is alien eggs. There were some things there that were slimy, so the two friends left them, and that's why people believe them to be eggs. What do you think this is? Let me know in the comment section below. In our number 5 spot, we have unknown frozen creatures. More frozen creatures in Siberia, you say? Yep, clearly this is an alien breeding ground of some sort. Strange creatures were recently found throughout Siberia. Many of these unknown creatures were found deceased and frozen in huge blocks of ice. There are creatures that have never been discovered which are believed to be alien, and even a species of dog was discovered that is so old it goes back to 1000 AD. Wow, well, I guess we're all going to have to plan our trip to Siberia, eh? I've always wanted to go on an alien expedition, so this is definitely where I will be going next. In our number 4 spot, we have frozen on Mars. Okay, this one is like a little bit of a stretch, as this evidence was not found frozen on this planet, but it is evidence of alien life, and it was found on Mars, and Mars can get to a temperature of minus 60 degrees Celsius, which is way past freezing, so whatever. Imagine that this evidence was found frozen, as it could very well have been. I just can't prove that, and I wanted to share this anyway. In 1976, the Viking Mars landers detected chemical signatures that indicated potential past life on the planet, or perhaps present life. An experiment mixing soil with radioactive carbon-labeled nutrients tested positive, and even though other tests done at the time did not test positive, the original scientists and others that have reanalyzed the data still stand by the original finding. There is definitely a possibility of alien life on Mars. In our number 3 spot, we have aliens in the water. In an interview in 2017, ex-NASA scientist Alan Stern spoke about the theory of alien life underwater frozen. He mentions that aliens are bound to exist and that scientists should focus more on water worlds. When he was asked about why aliens haven't been found to date, he was quoted as saying that there are many possible explanations. The great majority of worlds with biology and civilizations are water-ocean worlds. ETs at the bottom of ocean worlds would be protected from the likes of deadly radiation from space, if their planet does not have a protective atmosphere like it does here on Earth, and exploding stars. He went on to speak about how ocean worlds are usually freezing cold, and that these aliens would be living beneath a thick sheet of ice, and that is what would make it impossible to contact them. Fascinating. I could totally see this to be true, as there's so much of the ocean that we haven't even begun to explore yet. In our number 2 spot, we have alien fossils from Antarctica. Whoa, this is a wild one. In 1996, NASA scientists announced that they came upon a meteorite that appeared to be from Mars. A fossilized microbe in a potato-shaped lump of Martian rock was how it was described. It is believed that the meteorite was possibly from Mars and blasted off in a collision and wandered the solar system for, approximately 15 million years before coming to Earth and freezing for a little while in Antarctica. After further analysis of the rock, it apparently contained organic molecules and tiny specks of mineral magnetite, as well as nanobacteria. There is much debate about whether this fully indicates alien life, but a lot of scientists believe that it does. In our number 1 spot, we have a frozen ancient civilization. In 2017, there was a whistleblower by the name of Corey Goad, who claimed that it was discovered that an ancient alien civilization is frozen and buried under 2 miles of ice in Antarctica. Apparently, this discovery was made in 1939 by a German expedition, but it was only until 2002 that archaeologists and scientists were allowed on the site. Apparently, Goad originally only knew about this secret expedition because of a USAF officer working in the program, but eventually Goad himself journeyed to Antarctica with the US Air Force to witness this secret project, where they have discovered the ruins of a 55,000-year-old alien civilization. Not much more was revealed, but hopefully in the next 10 years we will learn more about these findings.